And while everybody's moving to the stage, let me just introduce the panelist. Let's start with Noriko. Okay. Noriko is an adjunct associate professor at pathology at the University of Utah School of Medicine. She's the vice president and director new technology assessment and licensing at AUP Laboratories, where she locates new technologies, organized collaboration with like-minded organization with the goal of bringing those technologies into the clinical laboratory setting. Okay. Then we have Michael Langer. He is an intellectual patent attorney partner at Michael Best and Frederick. He works with clients to provide practical, strategic patent counsel. He presents clients at all sizes, including university, emerging and mid-sized company, and Fortune 500 corporation. Mike has experience working on a broad range of technologies, but has particular experience with technologies in the chemical and life science art. And then we have Dr. Chuck Henson. He is Senior Research Manager at Lineagen. In this role, he managed external autism genetic research collaboration, including the University of Utah, the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, Golden Helix Incorporation. Dr. Henson maintains a summary of published autism genetic markers, evaluates the relevance of markers for genetic testing purpose. In addition, he managed multiple sclerosis genetics biomarker discovery projects, including University of Utah Department of Neurology and Department of Human Genetics collaboration funded by the Fast Forward. And last but not least, we have Liz Jenkins. Has over 12 years experience working in medical reimbursement for startup companies in the medical device and laboratory diagnostic industry. She currently serves as the manager of reimbursement services at Diagnostics, which offers an innovative proteomics blood test to identify a woman's risk for preterm birth. Ms. Jenkins plays an active role in the recent commercialization of the preempt test, including help define reimbursement strategies and process. Prior to joining Prognostic, Ms. Jenkins spent 10 years working for the Boston-based medical device company Normatec. While there, she was instrumental in obtaining consistent Medicare coverage for their projects and oversaw both their commercial and government reimbursement activities for over 6 years. Okay. So let me just start to give you a little bit my view on the diagnostic world. If you look to diagnostic, what you basically see, you see developing of new technologies, and then there are companies who are using existence technology, developing a new set of markers, a new assay, and then it goes into the biocomputing, trying to make sense of the data we generate. Now, if you look, and this is now going to the patent, if you look to the recent years, I would say at this point in time, there is a lot of unknowns and uncertainty about the patent situation for diagnostic, and maybe you can elaborate a little bit on that. I mean, these are basically the Prometheus and the Myriad cases.
Sure. Prometheus and Myriad, most of us.
Well,
oh, sure.
Yeah, you have to turn that on.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So for those of us who live in Utah, a lot of us are aware of the decision that involved Myriad Genetics a few years ago. There was a very significant Supreme Court decision that involved Myriad and its BRCA breast cancer genes and the kits that are used to diagnose people as having breast cancer based on mutations to those particular genes. And there was another U.S. Supreme Court case called the Prometheus decision, which was very similar. The two of them kind of set the landscape for patents related to biomarkers. And essentially, what the Supreme Court determined was that there is a judicial exception to the normal categories of patents or of technologies that can be patented or that fall within the rubric of being eligible for patent protection. And in particular, they were looking at whether or not somebody could patent a natural phenomenon or some kind of a natural correlation that related to biomarkers and genes. And what the courts decided was that you cannot patent, or it's not eligible for patent protection if all you're doing is identifying a natural phenomenon, and what you're trying to claim as far as patent protection is concerned is just the simple application of that knowledge. And so this had a huge effect on the diagnostics industry in general, as I'm sure everybody can appreciate. Many of the myriad patent genes, or many of the myriad patent claims were found to be invalid as a result of these decisions. And now it's really changed the way people are going about trying to protect diagnostics. When it comes to determining or finding that there is a correlation between a particular biomarker and some kind of a disease, in order to get patent protection on that knowledge, you need to do more than just show that there is a correlation. You need to have something more, and that something more can be in the form of a method for how you would detect increases or decreases in a particular biomarker, the types of treatment that you would perform after you've detected that there is some potential that somebody has a disease based on a biomarker. And so it's really changed the way patent attorneys have tried to protect these types of inventions.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me just give you my personal view is I think there's a lot of uncertainty around this. There's not a final court ruling at this point in time. And I think the only advice for people who want to do some kind of invention in this area is to get your advice as soon as possible.
I think that's right. And what we're seeing is a lot of people who are in this space are filing patents anyways with the hope that the court decisions are going to become more favorable in the long run, and it's going to provide a little bit more clarity that allows us to figure out how we go about getting patents in this space. Obviously, it substantially compromises the value of a claim if you need to have some kind of a treatment step in addition to the steps associated with determining whether somebody has a disease based on a biomarker, because a lot of companies aren't performing the treatments. They're instead making kits that are being used to diagnose. And so really where a lot of value is coming in nowadays has to do with companion diagnostics that are being commercialized in conjunction with pharmaceutical companies that are already making the predominant therapies for a particular disease. But as he mentioned, it is a evolving landscape, and it's evolving in the manner of many court decisions on this area, where people are looking to see whether there is something more than just the identification of a correlation between a biomarker and some disease.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me move forward. So you have the invention, you hopefully have an IP. I don't know really who wants to address this, but I think what should be clear to a lot of people who are going into this space, that in contrast to drugs where there's only one way to get your approval, and this is why the FDA, the landscape in diagnostic is a little bit different, right? I don't know who wants to comment on this. I mean,
is it on? Yes. Hello? Okay, great. So there's other colleagues here that can address this, but in the diagnostic space, there's the LDT, which is laboratory developed test, and that is a test that's validated by a high complexity lab, for instance. ARUP is one of them, a clear high complexity lab. Then there's the, of course, the FDA route where a vendor like, say, Roche comes up with a kit, goes through the FDA, and the laboratories buy those kits and do their mini validation and get it online. So roughly there's two ways to get into this space. Now, there are a little bit more nuances in the laboratory developed space, where the types of validation might be different between who you're trying to sell the tests to. So in a lot of our clinical practice, clear guidance and CAP regulation, those are the two things that we look at, are pretty sufficient. But if you're doing this for to support a clinical trial, for a pharma company, then you might have to meet the higher regulation. So, but in general, you don't have to go through the FDA route. There's ways to work with a lab like us that has the capacity to do the full validation on their site.
And just to add one thing to that, it doesn't mean also if you choose to go down the CLIA-CAP pathway or the LDT pathway, it doesn't mean you can't take the same technology and go down the FDA pathway at a later time as well. So you get it out on the market, you start to generate some of the data that you might eventually need for the FDA anyway, and then now you've collected in a clinical setting much of the data that you're going to need when you do the FDA filing.
I think that's, I think the message is clearly you can go both different ways, your market is different, and the cost for validation is significantly different, right? So if you go for the LDT route, your test is bound to one lab. If you go to the FDA route, you can commercialize all over, but in order, for example, to validate a PCR-based test for the FDA will cost you in the range between $10 to $15 million. Okay, let's assume you have your test on the market. What happens then? You need to get reimbursed, right?
Your biggest question really is who is going to pay for it before the payer does? Because payers generally want to see a fairly substantial amount of clinical data from the audience that will be using the test in the first place prior to them even being willing to consider coverage. So probably one of the major considerations that we need to look at for commercializing a new test is what's that price point and the market and the patient or physician office or whoever it is that's going to pay for it and at what level. And then once you've got your initial payer essentially set up, then you can look at, in addition to that, what clinical studies are needed, how am I going to build a payer in the first place? Is there a CPT code that already exists that we can fit into? Or do I need a miscellaneous CPT code in order to bill until I can generate a unique code for my particular test? And then generating all of the clinical data necessary to obtain that payer coverage through your managed care strategy.
So one of the hottest topic, and I think I've seen a lot of people going into this space, would like to use genomics as a diagnostic tool, whether that is based on NGS, DNA, or RNA. Can you comment on that? Because there's a lot of uncertainty around this.
There's a whole ton of uncertainty around that. I actually work in the proteomics space, which has even more uncertainty than genomics and the other diagnostic spaces. And the thing that I would recommend the most is get involved in the industry. It will probably cost a little bit in time and effort and money, but it is so crucial to get involved with the folks who already have experience in this realm. We've joined an industry group at my company that gives us access to other people in the industry who are a year or two or three further along the pathway in terms of getting Medicare coverage and developing the studies that they need for coverage. And that gives us access to some information and just gives us an idea of where that industry is going as we move forward. The regulations are literally being developed as we develop our commercialized technology. So when you can get involved in that, you can also be part of that development and really work with Capitol Hill and the people who make the legislation to ensure that what you need gets legislated the way you need it to, so you can get coverage.
Yeah, I think that's the important thing, once you have made a discovery and you got your test validated, you even may have implemented it in a CLIA lab, it's ready to offer. If it is a very unique test, the next hurdle you really have to go for is the reimbursement, and that can take quite a while until you get reimbursed. So just keep that in mind. But the reimbursement to some extent, and that is more, and it was touched to some extent in the presentation. At the end of the day, if you develop a test, and I would like to see the comments of the panel, what it frequently comes down is clinical utility. How much does it make a difference to the patient? Maybe you can comment on that, or everybody.
So one thing is showing that your test results in changes in medical management. When you get a result, you get an answer that says, oh, I didn't know this before. Now I can do something else for this patient, and it's a specific answer. It helps you get to the point where you can actually change how you're treating the patient.
And I will add to that, the other thing that payers really like to see is not only a change in medical management, but one that allows the payer to pay less to treat better and give better care.
In addition, if you do come up with a test that substantially alters the way care is given, that may, in some instances, lead to subject matter that provides the patent eligibility component that we're looking for, as long as the claim is directed to the way that the care provider is acting as a result of the findings of the test.
Mm-hmm.
So.
I think it is very important early on to know what your claim is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you have tests that you kind of say, well, it does a lot of things and let's just put it out and let the doctors decide. But I think you have to at least have one very strong claim of what it does. So is it going to direct a new therapy? If you didn't have this information, you would have done other things. Or is it just additive to a lot of things you're going to do anyway in the clinical space? And often you don't ask that question early enough to have a strategy. So I think you really need to think about that early in the process, and that does direct what kind of studies you need to do. And I think a lot of reimbursement is driven by the quality of studies, I think, yes?
So actually, I was just going to essentially reiterate exactly that point. Is it's very important to be able to quantify what it is that you're saying that you do. So I think we're in a slightly different realm because it's computational software, and we can get to customers where we don't actually have to worry about clear certification or FDA approval. We can sort of be more of a research tool. However, it's very important to be able to say, we may not actually find anything that you didn't find before, but we'll find it 200% quicker. So it's going to cost you this much less in terms of an analyst that was spending hours and hours trying to get to the bottom of it. We can get you there quicker, and we can get you there with the same quality of answer as before. So it's always good to be able to sort of have a number you can put on that.
I think the other discussion which comes more and more into this round is cost effectiveness, right? So if you have a new method, you develop a new method, which maybe is cool and fast and all these different things, but it does the same thing at the end of the day and costs more, it will be difficult.
Yeah, so I think that was actually part of the motivation for the target we're looking at now with ARUP is we can probably get the same result that they could as far as what the outcome will be, but we'll be able to do it, we predict, about 1/10 the cost. And so I think that is a major driving point. But can you upfront be able to predict that cost? I think can be challenging. We like to say what we could do in a lab, but at a larger scale, it gets a little bit tricky. But trying to figure that out quickly, I think, really can drive you in a different direction than what you thought was the most important.
Okay, great. Are there any questions from the audience?
It's a great discussion. Thank you. We're here in a university. We're talking about translational medicine out of academia into the commercial space. If I'm a researcher, say basic biomedical researcher, I come up with some important discovery, and I would like to put it to good use to help patients. I can pursue different avenues. I can consider going down the drug development path or down the diagnostic path. I have to consider the hurdles. IP, regulatory, reimbursement, investment. My question to the panel is, how would you weigh these different risks or hurdles comparing these two different paths?
I'll start. I would say that if you want to see it done in your lifetime, maybe diagnostics is a better choice. No, I think the time commitment for therapeutics, so we have therapeutic developments we're working on as well, and I think the cost, the time is significantly different.
The other question is, what's the market need? Where is something most needed? For many things, a therapeutic already exists, but you have to find a way to identify the patients that are candidates for taking that therapeutic. And sometimes that's more important than actually developing a new therapeutic. On the other hand, if there is no therapeutic out there, then maybe that's the important way to go, or the more important way to go.
So I'll give a really wishy-washy answer, but having gone through the process of setting up a company and going through all of what it takes to make this happen, if you don't really care about what it is that's going on, you're not going to do it. So to some degree, there's an element of what is it that you're really passionate about and where do you want to see this go? Because if you don't really care deeply about that, you're not going to see the process through either way.
I agree with you. That on the part of the inventor or the researcher, that I think you need to be engaged in the dialogue. And from our point of view, we have our own sort of vetting process of what technologies to choose from, because frankly, ARUP gets maybe 1 or 2 new things a week. So we have the funnel. But from your point of view, you will have to know who you can work with. And it's not about, going to the TVC and then hopefully somebody miraculously happens and picks it up for you. That rarely happens. If you get that, you're lucky. So I think you have to be ready to be engaged and then think through the process of getting it commercialized together. What part can you do to help that? And there are other parts that may need to be outsourced or the partner can pick it up. But I think you have to sort of look at that from your point of view. Not very easy. But I think, so far the TVC has been a good clearinghouse for pointing people to some opportunities.
I can just add to that, the technology that we use at Seroprognostics actually came out of a collaboration between this university and Brigham Young University down in Provo. So the ability to run through these systems that we already have set up here at the university, I think, use the resources that we have. And I would just add to the comment on clinical need, I don't think anybody goes into this with the intention of making money. Anybody who goes into reimbursement with the intention of making money is probably fooling themselves. But we go into it for the purpose of changing medicine, changing the world. And when we can take a technology, I think determining whether it's therapeutics or diagnostics becomes secondary to what can we do in the clinical space to make patient care better. And when we can answer that question, everything else comes naturally.
So the only comment I would like to give you an answer from my side is you should do both. And the second advice I would give you, you should align from the beginning on with people who have gone down this road. What you will see is if you go down the therapeutic road, the FDA will ask you more and more about pre-selecting patient. What is the patient population which will respond to? And that will actively lead you to a diagnostic. So if you have an idea that this therapeutic is working in one area, think about the diagnostic. But get people involved from beginning on who have been down this path. Reach out to AUP or people on the panel who know what it takes to get into this road, and then try to develop both. Okay, with that, we're over time, right? A little bit here, of course. I would like to thank the speakers as well the panelists. I think that was extremely helpful. Thank you very much, and I hope you have continued good meeting. Thank you.